I never thought I would be the kind of person to cut off my own child. I am a mother, and mothers are supposed to love their children unconditionally, right? But here I am, sitting in my quiet living room, staring at a wedding invitation I never thought I would receive. My son is marrying his brother's ex-fiancée, and I cannot bring myself to support it. I skipped the wedding, and now I have cut him out of my life. I know how this sounds, but I need to explain. I need to get this off my chest. Let me start by saying that I am not a perfect mother. I have made mistakes, and I have regrets. But I have always tried to do what is best for my children. I have 2 sons, Ethan and Daniel. Ethan is the older one, the responsible one, the one who always seemed to have his life together. Daniel, on the other hand, has always been more impulsive, more emotional, and more prone to making decisions that leave the rest of us scratching our heads. Ethan and Daniel have always been close, despite their differences. They were each other's best friends growing up, and even as adults, they remained tight-knit. That is why what happened next was such a shock to all of us. Ethan was engaged to a woman named Claire. Claire was sweet, kind, and everything you would want in a daughter-in-law. She and Ethan were together for 5 years, and they seemed perfect for each other. They had their ups and downs, like any couple, but they always worked through it. Or so I thought. About a year ago, Ethan called me in tears. He told me that Claire had broken off the engagement. She said she was not ready for marriage, that she needed time to figure out who she was and what she wanted. Ethan was devastated. He had poured his heart and soul into that relationship, and he could not understand why Claire would walk away. I did my best to comfort him, but there is only so much a mother can do. Ethan threw himself into his work, trying to distract himself from the pain. Daniel, being the supportive brother he is, spent a lot of time with Ethan, helping him through the breakup. At first, it seemed like Daniel was just being a good brother. But then, things started to change. Daniel began spending more and more time with Claire. He said he was just checking in on her, making sure she was okay. But it did not take long for me to notice that something was off. One day, Daniel came over to my house, and he was acting strange. He was fidgety, nervous, and he could not look me in the eye. I asked him what was wrong, and he hesitated before finally telling me that he and Claire had started dating. I was stunned. I did not know what to say. Claire was Ethan's ex-fiancée. She had broken his heart, and now she was dating his brother. It felt wrong on so many levels. I told Daniel as much, but he just shrugged and said that he and Claire had a connection, and they could not help how they felt. I tried to be understanding. I really did. But I could not shake the feeling that this was a betrayal. Ethan was still hurting, and here was Daniel, moving in on the woman who had left him. It did not sit right with me. When Ethan found out, he was furious. He confronted Daniel, and the 2 of them got into a huge fight. Ethan accused Daniel of betraying him, and Daniel accused Ethan of being selfish and not wanting Claire to be happy. It was a mess, and it tore our family apart. Ethan stopped talking to Daniel, and Daniel stopped coming around as much. Claire, of course, was caught in the middle. She tried to reach out to Ethan, to explain herself, but he wanted nothing to do with her. He was hurt, and he felt like the 2 people he loved most had stabbed him in the back. I tried to stay neutral, but it was hard. I could see both sides, but I could not help feeling like Daniel was in the wrong. He should have known better than to get involved with his brother's ex. It was a line that should not have been crossed. But Daniel and Claire were determined to make their relationship work. They started spending more time together, and before long, they were talking about getting married. I could not believe it. It felt like they were rubbing salt in Ethan's wounds. When Daniel told me he was going to propose to Claire, I begged him to reconsider. I told him that this would only make things worse, that it would drive an even bigger wedge between him and Ethan. But Daniel would not listen. He said he loved Claire, and he was not going to let anyone stand in the way of their happiness. I was at a loss. I did not know what to do. I could not support this marriage, but I also did not want to lose my son. It was a terrible position to be in, and I felt like I was being torn in 2. The day Daniel proposed to Claire, I was not there. He did not invite me, and I did not ask to be there. I found out about it through social media, like everyone else. There was a picture of Claire, holding up her hand with a shiny new ring on her finger, and Daniel, smiling like he had just won the lottery. I felt sick to my stomach. I could not believe this was happening. I knew Ethan would see the picture, and I knew it would destroy him. Sure enough, Ethan called me that night, and he was inconsolable. He could not understand how Daniel could do this to him, and he could not understand why I was not doing more to stop it. I tried to explain to Ethan that there was nothing I could do. Daniel was an adult, and he was going to make his own choices, whether I agreed with them or not. But Ethan was not satisfied with that answer. He accused me of taking Daniel's side, of not caring about his feelings. It was not true, but I could see why he felt that way. The tension in our family was unbearable. Ethan stopped coming to family gatherings, and Daniel and Claire started avoiding me. I felt like I was losing both of my sons, and I did not know how to fix it. When the wedding invitations went out, I was not surprised that Ethan did not receive one. But I was surprised when I got mine. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to go, to support Daniel and try to keep the peace. But another part of me could not bring myself to be there, knowing how much pain this was causing Ethan. In the end, I decided not to go. I told Daniel that I could not support his marriage to Claire, and that I would not be attending the wedding. He was furious. He accused me of being selfish, of not caring about his happiness. He said that if I did not come to the wedding, I would be dead to him. It was a harsh ultimatum, but I stood my ground. I told Daniel that I loved him, but I could not condone what he was doing. I said that he was putting his own happiness above his brother's, and that was not something I could support. Daniel did not take it well. He told me that if I was not going to be a part of his life, then he did not want me in it at all. He said he was cutting me off, and he did not want to hear from me again. It was a devastating blow. I had always been close to Daniel, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. But I could not bring myself to support his marriage to Claire. It felt like a betrayal of Ethan, and of everything our family stood for. The wedding went ahead without me. I saw pictures of it online, and it looked like a beautiful ceremony. Daniel and Claire looked happy, and I could see that they were surrounded by friends and family who supported them. But I was not there, and I knew that my absence had not gone unnoticed. After the wedding, Daniel made good on his promise to cut me off. He stopped answering my calls, and he blocked me on social media. It was like I no longer existed to him. I tried to reach out to Claire, hoping that she might be able to mediate between us, but she did not respond either. Ethan, on the other hand, was still talking to me, but our relationship was strained. He was angry that I had not done more to stop Daniel, and he felt like I had let him down. I tried to explain my side of things, but Ethan was not interested in hearing it. He just wanted someone to blame, and I was an easy target. I felt like I was losing everything. My family was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had always prided myself on being a good mother, but now I felt like I had failed both of my sons. The breaking point came a few months after the wedding. I had been trying to give Daniel and Claire space, hoping that they would eventually come around and reach out to me. But instead, I got a call from Ethan. He was crying, and he sounded like he was in a bad place. He told me that he had been struggling ever since the wedding, and he did not know how to move on. He said that seeing Daniel and Claire together was a constant reminder of what he had lost, and he could not take it anymore. I was terrified. I had never heard Ethan sound like that before, and I was worried that he might do something drastic. I told him to come over to my house, and I would do whatever I could to help him. When Ethan arrived, he looked like a shell of the man he used to be. He was pale, thin, and his eyes were hollow. He told me that he had been drinking heavily, and he had been having thoughts of self-harm. He said he did not want to live in a world where his own brother could betray him like that. I was heartbroken. I had always thought of Ethan as the strong one, the one who could handle anything. But now, he was falling apart, and I did not know how to help him. I tried to comfort him, but nothing I said seemed to make a difference. He was too far gone, too consumed by his pain. I knew that I needed to do something, but I did not know what. In a moment of desperation, I called Daniel. I did not know if he would answer, but I had to try. To my surprise, he picked up. I told him about Ethan, about how he was struggling and how I was worried for his life. I begged Daniel to come over and talk to him, to try to make things right. But Daniel refused. He said that Ethan needed to get over it, and that he was not going to let his brother's jealousy ruin his happiness. I was furious. I could not believe that Daniel could be so callous, so selfish. I told him that if he did not come over and talk to Ethan, I would never forgive him. But Daniel did not care. He said that he had made his choice, and he was not going to change his mind. I hung up the phone, feeling more helpless than ever. I did not know what to do. Ethan was sitting on my couch, staring into space, and I was terrified that he might do something irreversible. In the end, I called a crisis hotline. I did not know what else to do. The person on the other end of the line was kind and understanding, and they helped me come up with a plan to keep Ethan safe. They suggested that I take him to the hospital, where he could get the help he needed. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had to convince Ethan to go to the hospital, and then I had to sit with him while he was evaluated. It was a long, painful process, but in the end, Ethan agreed to stay for a few days so he could get the help he needed. I stayed with him as much as I could, but I knew that this was just the beginning. Ethan had a long road ahead of him, and I was not sure if he would ever fully recover from what had happened. Ethan's hospitalization was a wake-up call for me. I realized that I had been so focused on trying to keep the peace, on trying to be fair to both of my sons, that I had lost sight of what was really important. My family was falling apart, and I needed to take a stand. I decided that I could no longer support Daniel's marriage to Claire. It was not just about Ethan anymore, it was about what was right. Daniel had crossed a line, and I could not pretend that everything was okay. I wrote Daniel a letter, explaining my feelings and why I could not be a part of his life as long as he was married to Claire. I told him that I loved him, but I could not condone what he had done. I said that if he ever decided to end the marriage and make amends with Ethan, I would be there for him. But until then, I could not be a part of his life. It was the hardest letter I have ever written, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I sent it to Daniel, and I waited for a response. But none came. Daniel did not reply, and he did not reach out to me. It was like he had disappeared from my life completely. Ethan, on the other hand, started to get better. He went to therapy, and he started to work through his pain. It was a slow process, but he was making progress. He still had a long way to go, but I was hopeful that he would eventually find peace. As for me, I am still struggling. I miss Daniel every day, and I hate that things have turned out this way. But I know that I made the right choice. I could not support a marriage that had caused so much pain, and I could not pretend that everything was okay. I do not know if Daniel and I will ever reconcile. I hope that one day he will see the damage he has caused and try to make things right. But until then, I have to focus on Ethan and on healing our family. Looking back, I can see where things went wrong. I should have been more vocal about my feelings when Daniel first started dating Claire. I should have stood up for Ethan and made it clear that what Daniel was doing was not okay. But I was too afraid of losing Daniel, and in the end, I lost him anyway. I have learned that sometimes, being a good parent means making hard choices. It means standing up for what is right, even if it means losing someone you love. I never thought I would be the kind of person to cut off my own child, but here I am. The months that followed Ethan's hospitalization were some of the hardest of my life. Watching my son struggle with his mental health, knowing that I could not fix it for him, was a kind of pain I had never experienced before. Ethan was in therapy, and he was making progress, but it was slow. There were days when he seemed like his old self, and then there were days when he would shut down completely, retreating into a shell of silence that I could not penetrate. I felt helpless, but I also knew that I had to be there for him, no matter what. During this time, I thought a lot about Daniel. I missed him terribly. I missed his laugh, his sense of humor, the way he would always call me just to check in. But I also felt anger at him for putting us in this situation, for choosing Claire over his own family. I wondered if he ever thought about us, if he ever felt guilty for what he had done. I wondered if he even cared. I tried to focus on the positive. Ethan was getting better, and that was what mattered most. He started dating again, tentatively at first, but with more confidence as time went on. He met a woman named Sarah, and they hit it off immediately. Sarah was kind and understanding, and she seemed to genuinely care about Ethan. Watching him with her gave me hope that he might one day find happiness again. But even as Ethan began to heal, the rift in our family remained. Daniel and Claire were still married, and they seemed to be doing well. I would see pictures of them on social media, smiling and happy, and it would fill me with a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, and a strange kind of longing. I wanted to be happy for them, but I could not. Not after everything that had happened. I thought about reaching out to Daniel countless times. I would pick up the phone, dial his number, and then hang up before it could ring. I did not know what to say to him. How do you tell your son that you miss him but cannot forgive him? How do you bridge the gap between love and betrayal? In the end, it was Ethan who made the first move. One day, out of the blue, he told me that he wanted to talk to Daniel. He said that he had been carrying around so much anger and pain, and he needed to let it go. He did not know if Daniel would be willing to talk to him, but he wanted to try. I was nervous for Ethan, but I also admired his courage. I knew that reaching out to Daniel would not be easy, but I also knew that it was something Ethan needed to do for himself. I offered to be there for him, but he said he wanted to do it alone. The day Ethan went to see Daniel, I was a wreck. I could not focus on anything. I kept imagining all the ways the conversation could go wrong. What if Daniel refused to talk to him? What if they got into another fight? What if Ethan came back even more hurt than before? But when Ethan returned, he looked relieved. He told me that the conversation had been difficult, but it had also been cathartic. He said that he had told Daniel how much he had been hurt by what had happened, and Daniel had listened. Daniel had apologized, not just for dating Claire, but for the way he had handled everything. He admitted that he had been selfish, that he had not thought about how his actions would affect Ethan or the rest of the family. Ethan said that he was not ready to forgive Daniel completely, but he felt like a weight had been lifted. He said that he was glad he had reached out, and he felt like he could start to move on. I was proud of Ethan for taking that step, but I was also conflicted. Part of me wanted to reach out to Daniel too, to try to mend our relationship. But another part of me was still angry, still hurt. I did not know if I was ready to forgive him. In the end, I decided to write Daniel another letter. I told him how proud I was of him for talking to Ethan, and how much I missed him. I told him that I loved him, but I was still struggling with what had happened. I said that I wanted to rebuild our relationship, but it would take time. Daniel responded a few days later. He said that he missed me too, and he was sorry for the pain he had caused. He said that he understood if I needed time, and he would be there when I was ready. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was a start. Over the next few months, Daniel and I began to talk again, slowly and tentatively at first, but with more openness as time went on. We did not talk about Claire or the wedding, those were still sore subjects, but we talked about other things. We talked about work, about the weather, about the little things that had always been the foundation of our relationship. It was not easy, and there were times when I felt like giving up. But I kept reminding myself that Daniel was my son, and I loved him. I did not have to agree with his choices to love him. As for Ethan, he continued to heal. His relationship with Sarah grew stronger, and he seemed happier than he had been in a long time. He still had his bad days, but they were fewer and farther between. I was grateful for that. The holidays were the hardest. For the first time in years, our family was not together. Daniel and Claire spent the holidays with her family, while Ethan and I spent them together. It was bittersweet. I missed the way things used to be, but I was also grateful for the time I had with Ethan. I do not know what the future holds. I hope that one day, our family will be whole again. I hope that Daniel and Ethan will be able to rebuild their relationship, and that I will be able to fully forgive Daniel. But I know that these things take time, and I am trying to be patient. For now, all I can do is take things one day at a time. I am trying to focus on the positive, on the relationships that are still intact. I am trying to be there for Ethan, and to support him as he works through his pain. And I am trying to rebuild my relationship with Daniel, one conversation at a time. I know that I cannot change the past, but I can try to make the future better. And that is what I am going to do. I am going to keep moving forward, one step at a time, and hope that one day, my family will be whole again. Thank you for letting me share my story. It is not easy to talk about, but I needed to get it off my chest. If anyone has been through something similar, I would love to hear your thoughts. Sometimes, it helps to know that you are not alone.